If you really want to get a handle on modern China, its ambition, its tech, its military might, you can't just start with today. You've got to go back. You have to understand this deep, painful wound that, believe it or not, still shapes almost everything the country does. This is the story of how a century of humiliation created a superpower.
Okay, let's just dive right into this, because the contrast here is, well, it's just wild. On one side, you've got the China we all see today, a total powerhouse on the world stage. But rewind just a little over a century, and it was called the sick man of Asia. It was a nation so weak that historians say it was being carved up like a birthday cake by other countries.
So yeah, the big question is, what on earth happened? How do you get from that to this? How does a totally collapsed empire become a global titan? Well, the answer is tucked away in a really specific and painful period of its history.
To really get China's incredible rise, we first have to grapple with its devastating fall. And that brings us to a period that every single person in China knows about. They call it the Century of Humiliation.
And look, this wasn't just, a lost war or a bad treaty here and there. We're talking about a solid 100-year era where China, a civilization that had viewed itself as the center of the universe for thousands of years, was just systematically broken, invaded, and dominated. It was a complete shattering of the national psyche.
And when you look at this timeline, what really jumps out is just how relentless it was. It wasn't one bad event. It was a cascade. It kicks off with Britain basically forcing opium on the country, which leads to the Opium Wars. Then, foreign troops march into Beijing and burn the incredible old summer palace to the ground. After that, an alliance of 8 different nations invades. And the final blow? A brutal, horrific invasion and occupation by Imperial Japan. It was just one national trauma stacked on top of another.
So what was the result of all this chaos? Well, it's interesting. China wasn't colonized in the way we might think of, say, India under the British. Instead, all these different foreign powers just carved out their own little spheres of influence, where they controlled the ports, the economy, and the resources, but didn't have to bother with actually governing the place.
And this right here, this infamous phrase, really gets to the heart of that personal humiliation. Now, whether these signs were everywhere or not is debated by historians, but that almost doesn't matter. It perfectly captures that feeling of being treated like a second-class citizen in your very own country. It's a symbol of losing not just your land, but your dignity.
But here's the thing. This is absolutely a comeback story. After a full century of being knocked down, a major turning point was on the horizon.
So, fast forward to 1949. The Civil War is over. Mao Zedong stands up in Tiananmen Square and makes this powerful declaration. For the Chinese people, this moment was the real psychological end to that century of humiliation. Finally, after 100 years of being divided and dominated, the nation was whole again under one strong central government. China belonged to China again.
But getting the country back under one roof, that was just step one. What came next? Well, it was an economic transformation so big, the world had literally never seen anything like it.
Just think about this number for a second. 40 years. That's pretty much all it took for China to completely flip the script on its destiny and its role in the world.
So what happened? Well, in the late 1970s, a leader named Deng Xiaoping basically opened China up for business. And the result wasn't just growth, it was an absolute explosion. For 4 decades straight, the country saw the most rapid, most sustained economic expansion in the entire history of humanity.
And here's what that explosion actually looks like on the ground. We are talking about lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, the biggest poverty reduction in history. We're talking about becoming the world's factory, the manufacturing hub for literally everything, transforming quiet countrysides into gleaming futuristic cities, and of course, becoming the second biggest economy on the planet.
Okay, so what does any of this old history have to do with the China we see today? The answer is everything. That trauma? It isn't just in the history books. It's the rocket fuel for China's ambitions right now.
And you could draw a straight line from memory to policy. It's almost like a formula. Step 1. You remember foreign gunboats just sailing up your rivers whenever they wanted. Step 2. So your modern policy is to build the biggest navy in the world and lock down your coastline. And step 3. The goal that drives it all. Never, ever be weak again.
And you better believe this history is an incredibly powerful tool for the government. The Communist Party's whole argument for being in charge is that they are the ones who ended the humiliation and made China strong again. That narrative of never again is constantly used to rally the nation and to justify the party's tight control.
So, as we bring this all together, the one thing you really have to remember is that for China, the past isn't really in the past. It's always right there.
And look, knowing all this isn't about making excuses for China's actions today. Not at all. It's about understanding the why. Why is sovereignty such an absolute obsession? Why is being seen as strong so important? The explanation is buried deep in that collective memory of being weak and taken advantage of. The dragon, as they say, remembers.
And that really leaves us with the billion-dollar question for our century. China is back. No question about it. It's strong, it's proud, and it's powerful. But as it reclaims its place in the world, what's really driving the bus? Is it a search for the respect it was denied for so long? Or is it a deeper desire for a little payback? The answer to that question is probably going to shape all of our futures.